If you do not know history, you are doomed to repeat it. And that is the case when it comes to dealing with violent criminals. Fascinating story out of Boston, and a most unfortunate story out of Boston. The first ever Asian female mayor, I think is what they like to call her, Michelle Wu, in the city of Boston, has decided to essentially decriminalize a whole host of quality of life and property-related crimes. What can go wrong? Well, we're going to talk all about that and how this impacts the right to keep and bear arms, the trend toward making criminals the law-abiding friendly guys, and the law-abiding the criminal bad people that need to go to prison. Stay tuned. We'll break it down for you when we get back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, and member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar. And I'm proud to say the author of the brand new book, Israel Disarmed, What the October 7 Attack Teaches Americans About the Right to Bear Arms. We must always learn from our history and from the mistakes of others to make sure that we don't make them here. In particular, learn from the mistakes of the Israelis, their government, and their citizens, and their complacency to not allow private gun ownership at a level we see here in the United States, and the negative, dangerous, violent, catastrophic consequences that the Israelis suffered at the hands of Hamas on October 7th. So we have a crazy but unfortunate story out of Boston, and I think there's a lot of lessons here. So Boston's 39-year-old mayor, Michelle Wu, has decided to basically not prosecute, or to encourage the local district attorneys to not prosecute certain crimes, quality of life crimes. Now, this, of course, as you know, is terrible, because the distinction between a criminal engaging in a property-related crime and a personal violent crime is not that different. It's a very fine line. And I'll give you an example of this, and then we'll turn back to Mayor Michelle Wu in Boston. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, just last week or so, in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, the General Hospital actor John Wachter was shot dead by armed thieves. And why did they shoot him dead? They shot him dead because they were trying to steal a catalytic converter from his car. So that's an example of individuals who were engaged in a property crime of stealing a catalytic converter, and then they shot the owner of the car dead when he walked up to them. Illustrating my point of this video is that criminals that engage in property crimes are only very slight step away from personal violence against the law-abiding. Now, Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, obviously another liberal numbskull, doesn't understand this, because she is trying to go down the path of all these other sort of anti-American cities, the Seattles of the world, the Denvers of the world, the New Yorks of the world, the Philadelphias of the world, with this massive hike in violent crime that we've been experiencing, because they've decided that it is better to let violent criminals walk the streets, the homeless crazies, if you will, that are mentally ill, walk the streets and engage in violence against the law-abiding that are just trying to live their lives, because we apparently in certain parts of this country have decided that it is better to reward the criminal class than to reward the law-abiding class. And if you want to protect yourself, they want to put you in prison as a law-abiding American. It is a switch, not all over America, but in parts of America. And now it looks like the city of Boston is going down this terrible path, and we'll see what happens. I think we know how this story ends. But let's take a look at the cases in which the presumption is there will be no prosecution. Tell me if you think this is the kind of thing that we should be encouraging in a civilized society. Let's go down the list here from Boston of, again, the charges to be declined. These are charges for which the default is to decline prosecuting unless there's some sort of supervisor permission is required or something like that. So basically the presumption is this is okay. She's essentially encouraging the elimination of the laws that prohibit the following list of conduct. Let's turn to the scoreboard right here and check it out. Trespassing, shoplifting, larceny under $250, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, receiving stolen property, minor driving offenses, wanton and malicious destruction of property. Did you hear that? Wanton or malicious destruction of property. Threats. That's right, threats, excluding domestic violence, minor in possession of alcohol, drug possession with intent to distribute. Did you hear that? Drug possession with intent to distribute. A standalone resisting arrest charge, i.e. cases where a person is charged with resisting arrest and that is the only charge. And a resisting arrest charge combined with only charges that all fall under the list of charges to decline to prosecute, e.g. resisting arrest charge combined only with a trespassing charge. Now, this list is by Zero Hedge in the Daily Mail. I think the Daily Mail over there in the United Kingdom in some ways does a better job covering parts of America than American propaganda outlets do. So I like the Daily Mail quite a bit, and I always check out Zero Hedge every day. Very interesting articles on Zero Hedge. So check those out. I'll put a link to this article down below. Now, of course, what we're seeing here is Boston Mayor Michelle Wu is essentially saying that if you engage in petty property or other crimes, although it seems kind of dangerous where you're engaging in threats, that doesn't sound very good to not prosecute. But it seems to me that the mayor of Boston and her buddies there are interested in propping up criminals at the expense of the law-abiding. Now, this is also, of course, the same place that doesn't want you to have a gun to defend yourself because they think you're a serf. You're a subject and not a citizen. This seems to be a trend in these blue cities. I'm happy to report I don't think it's the case all across America, but certainly in these areas that the Democrats control, they think you are a peasant and not worthy of the right to protect yourself. And now they're actually engaging in policies that are designed to protect the criminal class at the expense of the law-abiding. I also want to make one observation, as again, the unfortunate lesson of the death of the actor John Wachter teaches, where the distinction between a property crime and a violent crime is a very thin line, and you never know when that criminal that originally wants to steal your wallet or your catalytic converter, in the case of the actor John Wachter, when that morphs into a violent crime that gets you killed or somebody else killed or very badly injured with a violent act. So what Michelle Wu here she seems to think that in the real world, there's a clear distinction between these minor petty crimes and violence, but that's not the case. In criminology, there's this notion or idea called the broken windows theory that essentially says that the way you make sure an area is safe is you make sure the area doesn't have broken windows, you discourage civil disorder, you avoid or you try to discourage antisocial behavior and petty crime, which is exactly what Mayor Giuliani did when he cleaned up New York back in the day by basically cracking down on petty offenses like jumping the turnstiles into the subway. And they found that if you started cracking down on those quality of life crimes, it actually cleaned up the city big time because a lot of the people engaging in those petty crimes were also people that had arrest warrants outstanding and so on and so on. And it made a big difference in turning around New York City, at least for a very long time. Now it's gone back the other way. But Boston, of course, has learned nothing. This 39-year-old millennial mayor has apparently learned nothing from the terrible outcomes of the cities, because it seems to me the only lesson that she could have learned from that is that they don't care about the law-abiding, they care about the criminal class, maybe because they think the criminal class is really constituents of the Democratic Party. I don't know, but they certainly are punishing the law-abiding Americans at the expense of the criminals. That is the only thing that I can see that explains this. She also raised the issue that she wants to demilitarize the police, whatever that means. I'm all for making sure that the police, who are citizens and civilians, do their jobs and respect the Constitution. I'm all for that. I don't support bullying police and the like. But the reality is they have a tough job and they do have to engage in law enforcement. And people who resist arrest or don't want to be put in handcuffs to be taken down to the station, well, sometimes you have to get physical with those people. It's just the nature of it. There's no polite way, if you will, to arrest people that don't want to be arrested. So sometimes you do have to be aggressive with criminals. It's just the nature of the job. When you're a police officer, and here you have the mayor of Boston, again, in my opinion, seems to be siding with the criminals over the law-abiding and over the police that are trying to enforce the laws. And last but not least, we must remember the philosopher John Locke, who was very influential in the Founding Fathers. He pointed out that property crimes are really personal violence. And what he points out is that, of course, the way you buy your house, the way you buy your car, the way you buy your stuff, your food, is, of course, you go out and you trade off your freedoms. You go to work for a living, so you give up your time and your labor in exchange for, let's say, money, and then you use that money to go out and buy stuff, a house, car, whatever. And so if a criminal comes along and steals your money, destroys your house, messes up your car and destroys your private property, that is essentially taking away your liberty, because you gave up your liberty to get the money to buy those things in the first place. So to destroy those things is, again, essentially destroying the freedom and liberty that you engaged in. It's taking away your labor, which is taking away basically your physical body, because you use your physical body, whether it be your brain or your brawn, to engage in work activities to buy stuff that then gets destroyed by the criminals. So when the criminals destroy property of the sort that Michelle Wu doesn't seem to think is a problem, they're again destroying aspects of your personal liberty, and that is obviously lost on Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, who I'm guessing doesn't even know who John Locke is, because sometimes the people that are the smartest really aren't that smart. And trust me, I know, because I interact with a lot of smart people. And sometimes the people with the best credentials, who supposedly are the smartest, are really the dumbest. But that's a conversation for another day. All right, folks, hope you learned something here today. Make sure you subscribe and resubscribe. We're trying to get to 150,000 subscribers. Don't forget to follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner. And yes, we'll see you again here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.